Goeiedag, welkom by Moermedia en nog 'n uitsending van Die Legkaart met myself Fanie du Toit. In hierdie episode van Legkaart gaan ons die stukkies effens rondskuif op die tafel en van 'n ander hoek kyk na die minister van Polisie se voorgestelde wysigings van die regulasies rakende privaat sekuriteitsmaatskappye en die toegang tot en die gebruik van vuurwapens in hierdie industrie. Met bestaande wetgewing soos die Vuurwapenbeheerwet, the Firearm Control Act, met regulasies wat die gebruik van vuurwapens deur privaat sekuriteitsmaatskappye reguleer, is dit vreemd dat die minister van Polisie oorweeg om hierdie absurde wysigings in oorleg met die regulateur te wil deurvoer. Die regering is self afhanklik van die privaat sekuriteitssektor om veilig te bly en nou wil dit voorkom of hulle die waghond se tande wil trek. Wat steek hier agter? Vorm hierdie voorgestelde wysigings deel van 'n groter strategie van die regering? Dit is uit hierdie voorgestelde wysigings duidelik dat die minister se fokus nie noodwendig op die voorkoming van misdaad en misdadigheid is nie, maar meer eerder die teenoorgestelde. Ek gesels vandag met Martin Hood. Martin Hood is geen nuweling wanneer dit kom by vuurwapenwetgewing nie. Hy is 'n gesiene prokureur met meer as 20 jaar ondervinding en staan aan die stuur van Martin Hood and Associates Attorneys. They specialize in public law, public procurement, constitutional law, administrative law, business rescue and insolvencies, criminal law litigation, civil law and labor law, family law, to name but a few. Met 'n liefde vir vuurwapens en 'n passie vir geregtigheid en regverdigheid staan Martin die vuurwapenindustrie ook die vuurwapen-eienaars jarelank by met vuurwapenverwante wetgewing en inligting. Martin, welcome to the program. You are welcome to proceed in English if you feel more comfortable. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Fanie, and thanks very much. I'm a bit more comfortable in English, and I hope your viewers don't object to me being a SOTI.
No, they won't. You're part of the family. Martin, you were one of the first individuals to voice your concern about this proposed amendments publicly, and that video that you posted did very good work. Do you think that there's a need for these amendments? What's your opinion?
Well, I think first of all, absolutely not, for both technical and practical reasons. No one knows what the purpose is. We can speculate, and you've touched on that. Are there hidden agendas? Absolutely yes. It was demonstrated a couple of nights ago that the regulator, the director of PSIRA, the private security industry regulator, he went on TV to hundreds of thousands of viewers and said, we want this new regulation, and he gave an example of shooting firearms in cemeteries, which is one thing that's banned, no firearms in cemeteries.
You've often heard of people who walk into a cemetery, for instance, over the weekend where people are being buried, and there's this one individual who's also coming to, to pay his last respect to whoever, and he's got 16 bodyguards. And all of a sudden, people have to move, and all of that. And then later you see people shooting up in the sky. So that's where we distinguish between the rogues and the people. So these regulations are designed to ensure that we do not have those type of scenarios. I hope that example brings it home.
He did not understand, or he did not want to understand, or he simply lied and said it needs to be controlled. The Firearms Control Act already makes that at least two different types of offense. So now we've got someone saying, whole load more regulation. But we're saying, hang on a second, you don't need it. What's the real purpose? And that we don't know.
Yes, I had a look at that interview that he had on Newsroom Africa, and he actually agreed with the hosts that according to them in July 2021, when that unrest and protest action did take place in KZN, that the majority of the individuals that were killed during that protest action was, according to them, allegedly, as a result of the actions of private security companies. And I mean, that's alleged information that was shared with a community to form a certain idea and to plant that seed that, in my view, the seed that they wanted to plant was that the private security companies are reckless. And that is definitely not the case.
July 2021. Phoenix, Durban. It is alleged that a private security company was responsible for most of the deaths that were seen in Phoenix.
What is actually strange is the fact that they did not mention how many thousands of protesters and looters did take part in that looting at that time, and what the consequences would have been were there not any private security companies to act in time.
Well, how about this?
Martin,
How about this for an interesting observation? More action, legal action, has been taken against security companies unsuccessfully, excuse me, I must emphasize, than against the protesters. Think about that. The millions of rands worth of damage done by looters, who do the police and PSIRA go after? The security companies. And they screwed it up, by the way. There hasn't been any successful prosecutions of security companies, although the police and PSIRA did try. And what PSIRA wants to conveniently forget is, and I'm speaking from experience, I've spoken to security service providers, I've experienced, I've worked through their experiences with them. The security service providers told me two simple things. They said, we were there and the police were not, first of all. That's critical. Where were the police? The second thing is that when the police were there, they worked with the police, and the police said, our hands are tied. You need to stop this. So PSIRA conveniently forgets or wants to ignore, but for the private security industry. In July 2021, we could well have had a coup.
Yes, that's definitely a great concern. And I mean, the whole approach that they currently have and on what you stipulated now, it would have been better for the Minister of Police to have said that congratulations and thank you to the security companies for assisting the police during that whole ordeal, to strengthen the bond that there's supposed to be between the police and the private security company.
So what happened with the investigation into the involvement of the security industry, there was a commission of inquiry chaired by three very pro-government persons. They released a report that actually congratulated the industry, and of course that report has been buried. And the reason why it's been buried is because the outcomes did not suit what government wants us to believe. So there's definitely, and I can say this for a long, long time. I've been involved in representing the security industry from when the government wanted to restrict foreign ownership in the security industry. And we need to bear in mind that at one stage, under President Mbeki, he said, come and invest in our country. So a number of very large international security concerns came and invested in this country. Then we had a different president, and that president said, no, don't want foreign investment. Happened to be President Zuma. He says, I don't want foreign ownership in the security industry. We're going to limit it. So then these organizations that had invested substantial sums of money sat back and said, but you invited us here, now you're kicking us out. And that was an economic issue, but then there was also a political issue. Why don't you want foreign investment, particularly in the security industry? We fought that and we succeeded in stopping that. But that was the start of where government said, we don't like this private security industry. Now, you can speculate. You can look at it on a pure sort of economic basis. It's a big, strong industry. It competes with the police, and the police don't like that. Or you can look at it on a more sinister level. And that is there something that worries government about the private security industry in terms of the number of firearms that they have and the power that they have? I do not buy into conspiracy theories because you can't prove them. But factually, if one looks at the proposals that the government has made about the security industry over the last 10 to 12 years, it's always been to take away access to resources, access to firearms, to limit ownership. And government has to know that if they do that, they weaken the country, they weaken the ability of people to protect themselves and their property. And they do not seem to care about that. And that is the issue that everyone should be asking our Minister of Police right now. And that is, why are you doing this? Explain in straightforward, reasonable terms. Why do you want to do this? And I'd love to hear from the Minister in particular what his thinking is. He's apparently said, oh, I wanted a robust debate. He hasn't started a robust debate. He started something that has put the fear of economic collapse and an increasing crime in everybody's mind. So that robust debate was either completely unthought of when he made that comment, or there's something more to this situation. And that's why we must demand that either these proposals be withdrawn or that they sit and explain why these proposals are good. We shouldn't have to tell somebody, we shouldn't have to tell government why something's bad. Government should tell us, we're doing this because you elected us. It's in your best interest. We work for you. We strive to improve your quality of life. That's our job as a government. We improve the economy, we make a stable environment, we encourage investment, we make employment. These proposals do exactly the opposite. They will lead directly to unemployment in the industry. But more importantly, because people's assets and persons will be less protected, it's going to lead to an increase in crime. And I want to give just two simple examples. The movement of cash. Now, our informal economy is probably one of the biggest providers of basic employment and basic sustenance. So it's anything from your informal traders to people that run a small business that don't have a bank account yet, and they don't have a big enough credit record to go and get a buy-in from the formal economy. So we have a large part of our economy that runs on cash. These proposals will simply prevent the movement of cash. They will prevent the movement of cash from banks and to banks, and they will prevent the filling up of ATMs, because people have ATMs in shopping centers. Now you're saying to a security officer, take a whole bunch of cash, go to an ATM, fill it up, and by the way, leave your guns back at the office. So what's going to happen? Either those ATMs are not going to get filled up, or security guards are going to get killed and money is going to get stolen. Now, that's very simplistic, but that is the reality. And it makes no sense that these proposals in that context are positive. They are negative. They are destructive.
Yes, Martin, I agree with you. If the minister and PSIRA are successful in pushing through this proposed amendments as it stands, according to you, you mentioned that there will be job losses, and I agree with you. But how could this further impact the private security sector as well as the private sector with regards to licensing and firearm use for self-defense in future? Because obviously, if the government is successful in implementing and pushing through this regulation as it stands, nothing will prevent them from referring to this tying of the hands of security companies when they get the rod out to get to us as private firearm owners in future. I mean, they did try to amend the legislation already a few times.
So there's two steps to what you've suggested. Let's deal first with the economic aspects, because I think that everyone would agree, it doesn't matter whether you like firearms or not, but everyone would agree that anything that is bad for the economy is bad for them. Now, the economic impact of these proposals is such that the mining industry is directly affected. Mining makes up a certain percentage of our gross domestic product in terms of diamonds, in terms of platinum, gold, and other PGM type metals. So that part of our economy is very concerned about this. But it doesn't stop there. Our retail industry, in other words, your well-known shopping center anchor brands where you go and buy your groceries, they are concerned. They are concerned because they have distribution centers. Those very distribution centers were the subject of attacks in 2021. So they have to have armed private security there. But then they also have to have armed private security in shopping centers, not necessarily specifically for them, but people want to go and shop where it's safe. They want to know that there's armed reaction on call. They want to know that there's a security officer that is there to protect them. And the very simple fact that in our minds, our first responder is our security company, not the South African police, should tell viewers absolutely everything about what I mean. We do not rely on the police. We rely on private security. The second part of your question was about gun control. Absolutely. Many of these proposals appeared in the 2021 amendments to the Firearms Control Act. And there is something very sinister which I will come to about this. First of all, the pushback from civil society on these proposed amendments was completely unprecedented. And as a result of that, and they were bad amendments to start with, very bad proposals. So they were not only rejected because people didn't want them, but they had very serious legal flaws in them. So the people that drafted it withdrew it. They sat back and they said, okay, we understand, presumably, we're not going to proceed with it. Those very same people, and I've got my eye on them, those very same people, and I know who they are, they then, in a very underhand way, because remember, 2021, amending an act of Parliament, so it has to go through Parliament. It has to be scrutinized by Parliament. Parliament approves legislation. So it goes through a process, a public process, and Parliament must approve it, not a minister. These proposals, which are similar, drafted by the same people, now come back as regulations which do not go through Parliament. That's a very underhand way to propose and get legislation onto our books. And these proposals contain a lot of similarities to the 2021 proposals, and it's a blueprint. It's a blueprint that if they can get it right with the security industry, then they're going to come after legal firearm owners after that. And that, I think, is also one of the reasons why the pushback from this is not limited to the security industry. It's not limited to the mining industry. It's not limited to the retail industry. Security touches everybody, whether we pay for it or not. Private security touches just about everybody. And then there are other organizations that have social issues as their core concern. So there are commercial organizations like the Firearm Dealers Association that is saying this is bad. There are organizations that support firearm rights that are saying that this is bad. There are hunting and sport shooting associations that are saying that this is bad. I have not, in the last 10 days, I have not seen one positive comment in support of these proposals.
Now, I must agree with you. I mean, I've also engaged with quite a few individuals and entities since you made us aware about this gazette that was published. And everyone is of the opinion that this cannot be allowed. And I mean, I think that Mr. Manabela Chauke overplayed his hand during that interview that he had on Newsroom Africa. We clearly played with words and also stated that PSIRA's focus is on the rule of law and not disarming the private security industry. but rather the regulation and control of firearms. And he emphasized regulation and control. Now, I mean, he didn't say that private security companies cannot apply for firearms or may not own firearms, but what's the use of having a firearm if you can't use it in the work that you are supposed to do? And that is a great concern for me. Would you say that it is safe to allow a single person, the director of PSIRA, to have control of the amendments that is suggested? How safe is that?
There is the Firearms Control Act. The regulations in the Firearms Control Act are so basic and general and are not designed specifically for the private security industry. So what we're trying to correct here is that gap, to deal with the rogues, to deal with those that are within the private security industry. And there's three things I think my colleague that is being confused about.
Yeah.
We're trying to regulate possession, use, and issuing.
So I was about to interrupt you and to make that very point. First of all, you've missed a critical word that he used, and that is possess, use, and control. And he said the following: we don't license firearms, the police do. So you can go and get your firearms. But that's not the complete picture, as you point out, because what happens then is you've got to go to him or an administrative official within the regulator, and you've got to explain to that regulator why you need firearms, how you need firearms, when you need firearms. Now, let's just take one step back and ask ourselves this question. Can any of us think of any organ of state that functions effectively and that can make decisions quickly and that functions in a manner that it fulfills its purpose for the public? So the answer is no, because our government is a mess. We just have deterioration everywhere you turn. So now what's happening is, in the midst of that chaos, a regulator stands up and says, I'm taking all of this power and I'm going to give it to these little officials. And they're going to make decisions about how a private business, and this is the critical point, these administrative officials are going to make decisions how a private business runs its business, which means that private business is no longer independent. It no longer has the right to make its own decisions. Whatever it does is going to be determined by what the regulator permits. In other words, we have a potential coup in the security industry where the regulator, and no one likes the regulator. The reason why they don't like the regulator, because the regulator doesn't do its job. And if it does do its job, it doesn't do it properly. And that's just atypical of our government. So what we're going to have is, if these regulations are passed, we will have the regulator not only regulating the industry, which is its function, it's going to control the industry. That's bad. That's not a free market, first of all. Secondly, the next step after that is someone's going to say to these administrative officials, you know what? I actually like that business over there. Make life difficult for them so I can go and snap them up at a bargain price. And you're just going to find that the degree of corruption, control breeds corruption. That's a fact. So you're just going to find that if these regulations are passed, bodies of people in government are going to end up controlling or buying and possessing security service providers. It's a recipe. It's a recipe for a complete and utter collapse of the industry, first of all. It's a recipe for corruption because you're asking administrative officials to make decisions that affect the day-to-day operation of your business. And of course, without private security, then the criminals will move in.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at it that way, then one might be tempted to say that this could just be another, it can't be state capture, but another attempt to gain more power. by certain corrupt individuals. And I mean, the mere fact that the minister is looking at measures to further amending the law rather than enforcing the current laws, that is a great concern. I mean, you mentioned earlier in the discussion that the discharging of firearms in a public space, and the director of PSIRA in that discussion also mentioned that. And his focus was actually on private individuals arriving at cemeteries with private bodyguards, 18 of them, and what the implication of that could be. My question is, what about normal individuals that go to a cemetery? And I don't know in the area where you stay, but where I've been, most of the areas around cemeteries are actually labeled as high crime zones. So the mere fact that the minister is amending the law instead of enforcing the current laws, that is a great concern. What is your opinion on that?
Perhaps we should look at a different example for cemeteries, just to show how broadly ill-considered these proposals are. I do work daily with the police, in the sense that I talk to police regularly, junior, senior, middle management, and I know from what I am told, reliably told, that there are certain areas where security companies are not regulated by the police, where the police are too afraid to actually go and enforce the law. And I'll give you an example. I won't tell you the area because that's unfair on the police. But if you have an event and a restaurant is going to be visited by someone that believes that they are very important, you will find that 4 or 5 or 6 black SUVs will arrive, a whole bunch of security guards jump out with firearms openly on display, no uniforms, and they will perhaps close off part of a street, but they will certainly close off the restaurant, and then this person will go in and everyone will go, oh wow, look, it's someone very important. And then people complain to the police and say, but this is wrong, come and arrest these people, take away their firearms, and the police say no, we're too afraid to. That's a fact. So now the solution is, from government, the solution is, let's make more laws. We're saying, hang on a second, what about the existing laws? Carrying a firearm in public, not being uniformed properly, not having identification tags, and a multitude of other offenses. No, we don't have enough good laws. Let's make more laws. And it goes back to the basic principle, and that is, enforce your existing laws properly first, and then see if you need additional powers. That's the first point. The second point is, that is the police. Now, if the police are afraid of these rogue supposedly private security companies, what these proposals do is they create a parallel law enforcement system. So now what PSIRA, the regulator, is saying, they're saying, no, our inspectors will go and do it. I know they're inspectors. They are not going to walk into a group of 10 or 12 armed security guards and say, give me your guns. A, they don't have the legal authority. B, they'd be phenomenally stupid to confront armed security guards like that when they're unarmed. But this is what these proposals say. They say, no, that's okay, please, we can do your job. We will go and fix all these problems. No way. No compromise. And that's why all of the objections that I'm writing say we reject this in toto. But there's another plan as well, in the sense that, and no decision has been made yet. It's a proposal that I'm going to make to major players in the security industry tomorrow, in terms of if they proceed with this, and we're going to tell them, we're going to warn them. If they proceed with this, then we're going to actually attack the underlying legislation as unconstitutional. And that's not my opinion. It's actually the opinion of the South African Law Reform Commission. And if we do that, we may end up severely impairing PSIRA's ability to do certain things. And I think we maybe have got to the point now where the industry is simply going to turn around and say, not only are we going to just push and stop, we're actually going to push back. We're going to take the offensive, because I think that's what needs to be done here. Reject these in toto, but and also what people don't know is there's been another set of regulations in January that are equally as stupid. And they actually flew under the radar, unfortunately. No one picked up on it until it was too late. And those are proposed assets in transit, proposed regulations for assets in transit. But what I'm doing is, in my objections, I'm also including objections to those other regulations as well, because they really, I'll give you a simple example. Those January regulations deal with assets in transit, and they stipulate that if you're going to transport an asset, a high value asset, and they use the word asset and high value asset, or phrase, interchangeably, but they say if you're going to transport a high value asset, then you've got to do it in a marked vehicle. Now, we can all remember that video a few years ago of the guy Leo, who was in a Land Cruiser carrying, I don't know what he was carrying, but he was carrying, he was carrying a whole bunch of, I think it was cellular telephones, and he got attacked. And you can see how the attackers just carried on. So now I know that a lot of, for example, cell phone companies, distributors, they do not put a whole bunch of cellular telephones in a vehicle and say, I have 1,000 cell phones to be robbed. Please come and rob me. They do it subtly. They transport it in vehicles that are not marked. Now these regulations stipulate you've got to put on your vehicle assets in transit. Now, why would you want to do that? All you're saying to somebody is, here's a vehicle that you can hijack because it's got a lot of assets in it. Then if you look at these regulations and the regulations I'm talking about, you've got to do a risk assessment. So you've got to tell PSIRA, hey, we're going to do it. We're going to do a movement of assets. Here's the details. What can happen with that information? How secure is that information? It's got a value. Someone will see that information and they will sell it, just like the police sell firearms out the back door of police stations. Someone will sell that information and say, in a week's time, there's going to be a movement of 1,000 cellular telephones. There's the details. And it will happen. And this is not my concerns. This is the concerns. I've got files here where those people that transport that type of item have come to me and said, we cannot let this happen. As it is, our guys are attacked and we lose security officers. Now you're telling us that we've got to make it even more dangerous.
I mean, it doesn't make sense for those vehicles to be marked, to be visible. If it was dangerous goods, like explosives or components or that, then it would have been advisable to mark the vehicle. But
because
this is basically taking a bucket of red paint and taking a bucket of red paint and marking a big cross and a dot around your things on your back.
Hijack this vehicle.
Yeah, I can't see how that will play out in a good way. And it's actually reckless, because that then it might seem as if this is only a stepping stone. I mean, the next thing that they could say, and I'm speculating now, is that when these inspectors then go out and they can't do their work, can't enforce the law, although it's not their lane to move in, then the minister might have another amendment to the law and take the firearms away completely. Now, would you say that there's sufficient public awareness about the public participation process? And do you have any figures about how many complaints have been submitted up to now? Because we at Boere Media had a look, and it seems as if there has been some confusion with regards to which email address, for instance, must be used when lodging a complaint and sending it through. I myself phoned PSIRA and inquired at the front desk what is the applicable email address to use, and the lady that answered the phone gave me the wrong address. I don't know if she didn't know what the correct address is or supposed to be, but it just seems as if there is a lot of miscommunication in their own house. So according to you, firstly, the public participation process, are enough people aware of this? And do you have any idea of the involvement of the public as well as private security companies in opposing this law?
My first piece of advice is that the media, this is as important as writing an objection, because the more that the public are sensitized to this, the more that the public will talk about it, the more that the minister and the regulator will understand that the public doesn't like this. I know that the amount of media attention and the amount of objection so far has completely taken government by surprise. And that's a good thing. I don't know how many people have actually formally objected. I have received hundreds of emails with very simple objections. I can tell you that across the economy, there will be objections. As I've mentioned, the retail industry, the mining industry, the security industry itself, civil society organizations, there will be objections. The email address that was published was incorrect. And again, with all due respect to a regulator, if you can't get your own email address right, then how good, what does that say about other things that you do? The correct email address is regulations@PSIRA.co.za, regulations@PSIRA.co.za, and PSIRA is spelled PSIRA, PSIRA. My advice to everybody is simply, one should read the Government Gazette, but that may be quite intimidating to some people. My advice is watch a program like this. Make notes of what we've been talking about, that it affects every element of the industry, that movement of cash will be affected, that it will adversely affect the informal economy, in particular that uses cash, that not allowing firearms in public areas means not only that those areas are not protected, but it means that they become higher risk. So the public moving into those areas will then potentially be subject to a higher risk. And we all know that criminals take advantage of weakness. So if they perceive that a shopping center is not protected, then they will target that shopping center. And even more so, if that shopping center has shops that sell high-value electrical goods. We're talking about your white appliances and televisions and so on. So it affects everybody. And this is what your viewers need to write. They need to say, if you take away the ability of the private security industry to actually protect their clients, that affects everybody. It's as simple as that. Don't do this because you're going to make crime worse.
Yes, thank you for that. And I want to tie on to that. I think the advantage that we currently have with a program like this is that we're not trying to push a certain ideology or a certain idea. The whole idea behind this discussion is public awareness. The public must decide for themselves, but we must show them, in Afrikaans, ons moet hulle wys waar die dubbeltjies in die pad lê. And you're playing a big role in doing that. And thank you for that. And in short, Martin, the road ahead, what does that look like according to you with regards to the rights of private gun ownership?
So I think in terms of this set of regulations, we're on very, very solid legal ground if they are promulgated and made law. In other words, there will be legal challenges. There's no choice but for legal challenges. And again, that's not the words only of the security industry. I have been in touch with colleagues who have been instructed already to take legal action from other sectors of the economy. So that is a default position where you end up going to court. My hope, and this is where I extend an olive branch to the regulator and to the minister. My hope is that they do two simple things. If they cannot explain why they want this and what they want to achieve, that they will either withdraw them in toto, or they will sit down and listen to us. And we can explain to them how it's wrong and how to get, how to improve what they're trying to achieve, if it's a legitimate purpose. And let me make that clear, if it's a legitimate purpose. So that fundamentally, they need to talk to us. They haven't done that. Government hasn't talked to its citizens. It hasn't understood the consequences of this. So the next step is talk to us before we fight. Talk to us. And let's try and work together. Let's understand what you want. If it's legitimate, and I want to emphasize, if it's legitimate, then we will work with you. But if you've got an agenda to close down our business, if you've got an agenda that is going to adversely affect the economy, then you're going to have a problem.
No, definitely. Martin, is there anything else that you want to add, or a message that you want to put out there to further inform or motivate the public to participate? Anything in closing from your side?
I think we've covered it all. I think we've done a good job.
Now, thank you for your participation, Martin, and for your time and your insight. And we really appreciate the fact that you and your team are going the extra mile for the community. The puzzle pieces are still scattered on the table, and we are trying to make sense of it. Jy moet jouself beskerm en jou gesin en die voortbestaan en effektiwiteit van privaat sekuriteitssektor. Doen jou deel. Rig 'n vertoë aan PSIRA en die besonderhede sal onder in die skerm voltooi word. Jy het die reg om te kies hoe hierdie legkaart op die ou end gaan lyk. Martin, thank you so much. Baie dankie. En ons gesels dan weer.
Thank you.